I'm Matt Ball. I'm the House District 6A co-captain, and I'm honored to be moderating our debate today. The structure for the forum slash debate is going to be, we're going to start with just an opening statement from each of our candidates for 5 minutes, and then I will ask a series of questions, sometimes to the whole panel, sometimes directed at...
2 minutes for opening and closing, and 1 minute for each question.
Okay, I stand correct. 2 minutes for opening statement, so it'll have to be brief. 1 minute for each question. Sometimes I'll direct that to all 3 candidates, but I may ask you individual questions as well.
And 2 minutes at the end.
And 2 minutes at the end. As Andrew mentioned, if you have questions that you would like to be asked, please pass them to Andrew, and he will pass them to me. So without further ado, let's just go down the line with our opening statements. And we'll start with you, Kyle.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us tonight and allowing us the time to speak with you. My name is Kyle. It rhymes with mile. And I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm running for RTD in District A. Most of my adult life, I worked for Democratic and progressive causes, worked for Bernie Sanders, Governor Polis, the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, Defenders of Wildlife, Labor, and I worked on the vaccine equity program here in the state of Colorado. I also grew up, it was an honor working in those places, and I enjoyed solving challenging problems, and that's a lot of reasons why I'm running for RTD. One of the biggest problems I think we have right now, and the cause that rises above for me, is combating climate change. I think it's critical to ensuring we have a habitable planet with clean air, land, and water, and that's why I'm running for the board. Some of my core values are transit, environmentalism, and social equity. My grandparents were surgeons for the railroad, nurses, Democratic politicians, and wildlife conservationists. My dad ran an environmental manufacturing company, and my mom worked in social work field. Right now, I'm a data scientist. I build cybersecurity and federal budgeting software with AI and machine learning to help taxpayers save money. Before that, I got a master's degree, and I was a field organizer, campaign manager, and finally a public opinion researcher. And I worked at every level of government as well. So I worked in all 3 branches of government as employee, contractor, intern, volunteer, all the way up and down. I'm also a husband to an amazing woman here and leader at the state of Colorado. And then I'm a dad who wants to teach his kid about what it means to be part of the community.
Thank you. Bob, over to you.
Is this on? Press the button.
Now it's on. Thank you, Chris. Hi, I'm Bob Dinger. Let me provide a little contrast for you. I'm an alternative to the status quo. As a bus driver, union local president, and transit advocate, I've been doing this work for years. I'm the only candidate in District A with direct experience of RTD operations, security, management, and governance. A safe, reliable, and trusted transit system is so boringly obvious. What's that supposed to be? Innovation? The real question is, how did we get into this mess, and how do we get out of it? I started paying close attention to RTD's board in 2020 because my life literally depended on it. I had passengers coughing as they stood within inches of my face. No one wore masks. The very real fear of being exposed to a deadly virus became part of my workday. The agency was slow to respond, its board was also, and I got angry. It became painfully obvious that my life and my fellow transit workers didn't mean squat to RTD. I spoke up, writing emails, calling board members. Some have credited my advocacy for helping to expedite the provision of personal protective equipment and the institution of rear door boarding. Having driven an RTD bus from 2019 to 23, and after nearly 5 years of regularly absorbing board and committee meetings, organizing transit forums and town halls, I decided to run for the board last May. I figured I'm just what they need, another old white guy. I'm a long-time progressive with a clear-eyed view of what we need with and from RTD and some considered views on what it's all about. Other than respect, safety, trust, and transparency, it's about time. Time is our most precious resource. Riding RTD shouldn't take 3 times as long as driving. It shouldn't be a personal sacrifice to use public transportation. We need reliable service every 15 minutes. Connections should be efficient. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Chris Nicholson. I am a full-time RTD rider, the only one running out of all 14 candidates across the metro area for the RTD board. I took the bus to get here today. I'm running because RTD is not delivering the service that people want, and I know that it can do better. I'm a vocal housing and transit activist, a proud and active Democrat. I'm the only candidate on this stage who's a precinct organizer, an active volunteer, and a regular Democratic donor. As an advocate, I've dug in, studied, listened, and shown up and earned the trust of people like our mayor, Mike Johnston, Senator Chris Hansen, Councilwoman Sarah Parody, who's here tonight, SEIU Local 105, the RTD Transit Workers Union, Colorado Black Women for Political Action, and many, many more people across the metro area. I've also earned the trust of other candidates. That's why 7 of us joined on a shared policy platform to address safety, reliability, and quality within RTD's existing budget. I led the effort to bring everyone together because the biggest failure of RTD right now is a lack of bold collective action. We need leaders who know the details, are willing to step up big, and can bring people together. Read our plan, a commitment to riders, on paper or at fixrtd.com. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for caring about transit.
You've got 30 minutes.
That's fine. I finished early.
Succinct. That's how we like it. Thank you, gentlemen. The first question is, like many transportation districts throughout the country, RTD has seen ridership plummet since the pandemic. RTD has a plan to restore service levels to about 85% of their pre-pandemic levels, called the System Optimization Plan, which you're probably familiar with. The question is, do you disagree with anything that RTD is currently planning on doing to get ridership back up, like increasing main routes to occur approximately every 15 minutes, looking at the data to allocate resources to where ridership is the greatest right now? Or do you have a different vision for how RTD can restore services to the levels that it had a few years ago? And let's go in reverse order. So Chris, we'll start with you.
So I think the first thing I would say is I think RTD is not acting dramatically enough. I think the SOP went reasonably far in consolidating routes and trying to optimize around where demand is at its highest. But there were certain political concerns that went into the process there. And I think that we are at a moment now where what voters overall want to see is the highest ridership possible. I think in addition to that, RTD needs to be doing more on demand generation. There are virtually no programs right now that do outreach to, for example, the African American community, that do outreach to young people and college students to ensure they actually use the college passes and the free fare for youth that they're now provided with. I think there's a lot of latent demand in the system if RTD would do a better job of trying to capture it. And so I would focus a lot of effort on that.
Bob?
Thank you.
Hello? So, in July of 22, I wrote to RTD's board and asked why was the system optimization plan, which I applaud, by the way, which was going to cut long routes that were 90 minutes in half, delayed until 2027, which apparently is still the case largely. And the answer I got was we lack the resources. I asked what resources you're referring to. They said people, the people power problem. Well, now they're down to 3%, okay? That's the vacancy rate. Where's the service? They got 200 people almost sitting on the bench waiting to relieve people. It's time to step up. We're not going to see any changes until maybe May, maybe September of next year.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kyle, sorry, no problem. You're like 90% of people get it wrong. So, anyway, goals for ridership have lagged behind that of most other transit districts in the country post-pandemic. And I think there's a lot of key drivers that are part of the problem here. And I think first of all, we're not collecting the right data to understand what ridership is going on right now. And I think we could do a better job using existing resources to capture more information and utilize that information in better committing to a strategy for a long term. I think the system optimization plan is a bold goal, but it's missing a lot of the metrics that are needed to actually drive the transit system that we deserve. And I say that because we only get about half of the data. You just tap in, you don't tap out, and we don't. And there are other ways to capture that information through cameras and checking density.
Thank you. Bob, you brought up the topic of resources. As you know, a critical resource for RTD that it's short on is drivers, and there's only so much that RTD can add routes if it's struggling to add drivers. What strategies would you employ on the board to increase RTD's ability to hire and fill its current driver shortage? And Bob, we'll start with you.
Well, again, maybe I was talking too fast, but they filled that gap. They've got the drivers, okay? There's only 27 vacancies right now for bus drivers. The issue is retention. How do you keep people in a job where you don't get respect, where you hardly get a break? After a 90-minute run, you might have 2 or 3 minutes to use the bathroom, if you're lucky. It's a very stressful job. So really what we need to do is start looking at the compensation, and that is crucial.
Thank you. Chris?
So I'm really proud to actually have the endorsement up here of the ATU 1001, the bus drivers union, which are the folks that operate the trains, operate the buses, as well as the mechanics. The first thing I'll say is we have more solved the issue with the buses than we have with the light rail. There are still significant shortages with the light rail, and it's why the light rail is running so infrequently. The second thing I'll say is that I've talked extensively with the president of ATU, and their biggest concern, he's right, it's retention. People are leaving to go drive for UPS because they're not going to get spit on, they're not going to get harassed, they're going to have time to use the bathroom. They want to fix working conditions, and I'm dead set committed. If I'm on the board, I pledge this to Lance, practically a blood oath. I will deliver better working conditions because I think it's how we fix the retention issue, and I think it's absolutely just the moral thing to do. We should not treat bus operators worse than we would want to be treated if we were working at any other job.
Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I echo both the statements of the gentleman next to me here as well, but I think that we can go a little bit further with that. Talking to the union as well, and understanding that safety is one of their concerns. I think one of the things that they want to do is put the cameras in the right place, and on the buses, the cameras were not installed in the correct location. So there is some technical debt in the system that could increase safety, but I think in the long run, we know from human behavior that increasing ridership is going to also increase safety and create a healthier working environment for the operators, because larger ridership means more people on the buses, means people usually are nicer and act more close to social norms. So I think what we have to do is focus on both the retention issues that we're seeing here with the union and the technical side of things too, but like going across the board to ensure that ridership is increasing as well.
Thank you. So picking up on that, you mentioned safety. So a follow-up question. Safety is a big deal for a lot of potential riders of RTD who might steer clear because they don't feel safe on RTD buses. What would you do to combat safety, or at least the perception of safety on RTD buses?
Absolutely. And so I worked with the ACLU and law enforcement agencies on their de-escalation policies and use of force policies. And I've worked with the ACLU on interacting with transit agencies as well. And I think that when, doing the studies, we saw best outcomes when there was a tiered approach to approaching, crime and safety on the transit system. So first, using ambassador programs, which RTD has a pilot program, expanding that to improve customer safety and also the safety. Second is going to be like Denver Star program, where we have, a a civilian emergency approach to emergency situations, getting people the help they need. And then the next step is going to be, engaging with law enforcement to de-escalate as fast as possible any violent situation, and then keeping public safe and fit.
Thank you, Bob or Chris. Would you like to add any comments on that?
I will. Yeah.
So safety is the #1 issue in the year that I've been running that I have heard from voters across District A and especially in this House district. And so it's a big reason why I went out and got to know all of the other candidates running for RTD and built a coalition of 7 of us that agreed on a joint comprehensive platform to address safety, reliability, and quality, because I want people in this community to be able to ride. What we're going to do, we are going to deploy transit ambassadors across the system. We're going to pay for it by getting rid of the rent-a-cops that RTD currently spends $22 million on out of a $40 million safety budget. We're going to spend more money on safety because I want everyone who goes to a transit station, who goes to a bus stop on Colfax, to feel like they belong. And that means more presence. It does not mean more cops as frontline workers for these incidents. It means putting somebody there with a radio and the ability to help de-escalate a situation and talk to a police officer if absolutely necessary. That's how we fix safety.
Thank you. Bob, you can decline, but would you like to add anything?
Sure.
Thank you. I've been up close and personal with these situations. And I will say that a great mistake was made back in 2021 when the president of ATU 1001 called Union Station a hellhole, and they basically locked the place down. Denver's living room, okay? You can't be there without a cocktail in your hand. And I don't think that's right. I think harm reduction needs to be looked at. I've met with Lisa Ravel with the Harm Reduction Action Center. She would love to have a presence downstairs at Union Station, or even at the 40,000 square foot retail space, the University of Denver Light Rail Station, which has been vacant for 18 years.
Thank you. Chris, you've mentioned a couple times the commitment to riders that you published in September, along with several other RTD candidates, Chris Gutchenritter, Matt Larson, Bernard Celestin, Patrick O'Keefe, Karen Benker, and Brett Pagliari. Your opponents say that they were not asked to participate in the commitment to riders. Bob, you called this classic backroom politics. Kyle, you said that had you been invited to join and discuss this pledge, you would have participated, but that you were not asked. Chris, you said that you did offer to meet with Bob and Kyle when they entered the race, but they did not respond. What's going on? Chris, let's start with you.
So, I'm not planning to serve with both of them. I'm planning to serve instead of them. And I wanted to build relationships with the other people that will be on the board so that we can work together to do this. One of the benefits of getting in the race early and showing up at meetings and showing up at forums and talking to people and having conversations and texting God knows how many times with all of these people is they get to know you and they trust you. And this grew out of conversations of all of us saying, how can we fix this? We don't want to just get elected, sit on the board, and wait for something to come along. The problem we've had is a lack of action. I believe everyone on the board wants to do the right thing. I don't believe they've come in and said, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to push it through. And I think that's what people are waiting for. So this grew out of us getting together. I don't see why I needed to invite them. If they wanted to do it, they had every opportunity to go and talk to the candidates themselves. They didn't, and I think it speaks volumes, quite frankly.
Bob? Well, let's see. I got a phone call from Chris back in the spring. Boy, he really didn't want anybody to run against him. And I, frankly, heard that as an invitation. I see the commitment to riders as being a nice idea. Fairly back, there was not much specific. But the riders are about 3% of our population. I'm interested in the non-riders. I'm interested in the fact that this system doesn't work and that you, from a practical standpoint, unless you are independently comfortable, can't afford to spend time on RTD when you can get there 2 or 3 times as fast driving. I drove here tonight. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I also spent hundreds of hours behind the wheel of an RTD bus. I'm very familiar with the realities. I know what needs to be done. Thank you.
Kyle? Yeah, of course. So there's two questions there, essentially, and I'll take an approach at one and see if I've got time for the other. So the board has a governance mandate by statute and a GM to determine the tactics. So the board actually just sets policies to guide the agency. And I think the two biggest things missing in the plan, so to speak, were policies to guide the agency and climate goals, right? So we're trying to improve ridership so that we can meet our long-term climate goals. And we do that by oversight, auditing, ensuring budgets and contracts are sound, improving internal and external communication to build better relationships with staff and community, setting clear expectations for the goals and data-driven metrics for safety, ridership, climate, and social equity. And then we want to create a healthy working relationship with the board and the public. And I think that kind of leads into the initial question. And, Bob and I were both personally attacked by Chris. So I don't think it's any surprise that after he attacked myself, my family in the press, that I didn't reach out to become a friend.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the discussion about RTD at the state capitol. So I'm curious what your opinion is on the RTD reform proposals that were floated last year in the legislature. That's part one of the question. And part two is whether you would entertain any changes structurally to the RTD board. And Bob, let's start with you.
Thanks. So I organized, along with Michael Guzman, Director Michael Guzman, the Transit Town Hall, which was held on tax day last spring, to push back against the taxation without representation that the Transit Reform Act represented. I met with Representative Froelich and Representative Lindstedt, and just as a casual aside, mentioned that I thought I might run for RTD District A, and in unison, they were like, "We would love that." And I thought, wow, they must really like me. But then afterwards, I thought about it. I'm like, maybe you don't like Chris. Well, maybe it's a combination of the two, and two things can be true at the same time. Your second part of your question, I apologize.
Are there any changes that you would entertain to the structure of the RTD board?
Yes, I think it would be wise to consider a couple of at-large folks so that every citizen would have 3 representatives potentially as directors on the board.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I'll take it in reverse order. As I say in the Denver Post and the voter guide, I think we should reduce the number of voting representatives. I'd like it to go down to like 11 or so. That would not increase the size of the districts dramatically, so it wouldn't make it that much harder for transit-dependent folks like me to run, and it would let us add some appointees from the state, from the governor, from the mayor, to have a better dialogue on the board around the needs of the community. The second thing is, I was one of the leading opponents of the bill. A bill, by the way, that Kyle's wife was one of the leaders on. And if you're wondering about what the dynamics of the race are, ask him about that. But I opposed the bill because it would have taken away representation from Denver. That's why the city council opposed it. That's why Chris Hansen opposed it. That's why most of our leaders stood with me in opposing the bill. They're the reason that they told me to do it, and I agreed with them. And we need people who are going to stand up and do the unpopular things. It's why I have a primary right now. It's why I have opponents right now, and I'm fine with that. I'm willing to take on tough fights, even if it means that the governor's mad at me.
Kyle?
Thank you for bringing up Danielle. My wife is the Deputy Chief of Staff for the governor. She does not deal with any policy. She runs the operations for the government. She's raised tens of millions of dollars for COVID response. She's helped refugees here in our state, and she's quite honestly kept our state together through some of the most difficult times. So if we're going to talk about her, let's talk about the things that she has done. She did not have anything to do with the RTD appointed legislation. It's a separate policy department. And I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of that process. And I also, just in context, in my past, I've worked with appointed boards. I've been appointed to boards. I've worked with elected boards as well. I think that if there is good vetting and a process, an appointed board, a technical professional board can be incredibly effective. I also think if there's good competition and we bring out the best candidates for an elected board, we can also have a very apt and well-serving for the public on both sides.
Thank you. Right now in the fast track internal savings account, there are about $200 million up for grabs. As you probably know, the governor would like to use most of that money to complete the long-awaited corridor in the Northwest from Denver to Boulder, but there's other ideas about what to do with that money, whether it's focusing on the line in Westminster to Longmont, north from 142nd to 162nd Street, southwest from Mineral to C470, or downtown from 30th and Downing to 38th and Blake, the airport train connection, just to name a few ideas that have been thrown out there. What would you do with the internal savings account money, and how would you approach that issue? Kyle, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the funding source for RTD is not sustainable right now, and I think we have to look at multiple ways to improve that source, because I don't know that $200 million is going to finish any of those projects with current budgets and assessments. And I don't think that the train to Boulder, we even have like a complete assessment of the funding that it's going to require for that. So I think we need to start by improving ridership, start by collecting more, getting more people on trains and buses. And then we have to create a strategic plan that includes transit-oriented development, looks at social equity and growing ridership for transit agency for decades to come. And then I think we can look at ways to go back to voters. We can work with the state. We can work with the federal government to create a transit system that's actually sustainable in the long term.
Thank you. Bob?
I'm sorry, I'm an old man. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What would you do with the Fast Track's internal savings account, where there are currently approximately $200 million that could be allocated to one of a number of commitments RTD has made?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I think I would have to defer to Chris here, who spends a lot of time in Boulder County. And I would think that based on my experiences riding the buses to and from Boulder, it's pretty spiffy. Those are coaches. Those are nice vehicles, very comfortable. You could fall asleep on them. You have a hard time doing that on the rest of the buses. I really would like to see Front Range Passenger Rail come to being. I think Amtrak is a great partner for that. I think they need to get more aggressive. Front Range Passenger Rail doing 2, 3, 4 runs a day is just not going to cut it. So I think we should go very slowly about spending that money.
Thank you. Chris?
So I agree with actually everything Bob just said. I have fallen asleep on the FF1. We do need to deliver Northwest Rail, 100%. We need to do it in a way that makes financial sense. And to what Kyle said, they have come out with numbers for Northwest Rail for the peak service plan. And if he'd been at the last meeting or any RTD meeting, he would know that. But because they presented in detail, it's $600 million plus $50 million a year. That's not sustainable for right now. It's not a reasonable use of money for 1,100 passengers a day. We need Front Range Passenger Rail to pass. And when it does, that takes care of most of the infrastructure necessary to build the train to Boulder and Longmont and makes it dramatically more affordable. So that's how I think we deliver it. And Bob is 100% right on this point. We need to spend that money wisely. The voters have entrusted us with it. We should not be reckless.
Thank you. We've just got time for a couple more questions. Speaking of money, the RTD directors make about $12,000 a year. That's not very much, especially in Denver. Why this job? Why are you running for RTD director? Kyle?
Yeah, thanks so much. So, as I mentioned in my intro, I'm doing this for our climate future. My son has asthma, and I've had to teach him how to use an inhaler. And I'd like for the inhaler to be a short-term fix. I'd like for us to improve our environment, increasing ridership, and reducing our impact on and bettering our climate. I'm doing this also because I don't plan on running in for anything else. I have years of experience working in transit. I've raised billions of dollars for transit agencies. I've helped them improve their ridership, and I've also built transit-oriented communities. I'm taking a holistic, strategic approach to this in hoping that we can build the coalitions necessary to create a regional plan that encourages people to ride and growth in a smart fashion.
Great. Chris, let's go to you next. Yeah, so I'm running because I've been a transit rider for 7 years, and I've had to put up with every time RTD has let people like me down. And quite honestly, most people who ride transit with me don't have the option of taking an Uber when their bus doesn't come. And so I know from very personal experience what it's like to see this agency not work. Yes, the money sucks. It's better than a lot of things. Lisa and other folks serve and get no money for the work that they do, the incredible work that they do. So I would love to see us raise the pay eventually. But for me, my whole life in politics, I have been focused on bridging the gap between the folks who do not have resources and those of us who do, and making it possible for people to lift themselves up and get access to the world. And transit is fundamentally about that. It is a service that serves low-income people and lower middle-class people, and when it works well, everyone else. And so we need to get to a point where transit is sustainable because it is something everyone wants, and then it will work better by doing so for all of the folks who need it the most. That's why I'm running.
So, I can't for the life of me understand why somebody would ride RTD when they have the opportunity to get there faster and more conveniently. I know a lot of transit-dependent people. My friends in the disabled rights community are truly transit-dependent. I really believe that we feel vulnerable when we're all alone on a light rail car or a bus. I agree with what Kyle was saying about the fact that if you have a number of people on the bus, you're going to be much safer. You're going to feel much safer. If the operators feel content and safe, riders will sense that, and then trust can return. We've got a huge opportunity. If we want to be a great city, we need a great transit system. RTD ain't that.
Thank you. Our last question. Assume that you are elected to the RTD board and fast forward 5 years. What's different about RTD because of the impact that you will make that won't happen if you are not elected? Chris, I'll start with you.
An entirely different direction taken by leadership. I'm not going to comment right now on whether that means firing everybody who's at the top of RTD. I think that's a very important personnel decision that has to be taken with due course. But we need to fundamentally rethink how we deliver services in our transit agency. We need to set us an expectation of what the customer experience will be like and work backward to the type of service delivery that requires. Right now, RTD puts out its service into the world and says, well, we screwed up at this, we screwed up at that. It's just the acceptable part of doing business. No, that is not how you get average people to trust what you are offering. You try doing that at a hotel, you will find you don't have customers anymore. So I'm very committed to completely reorienting the agency around the model of delivering a quality of service that we do not see right now and holding it to much higher expectations. And if that means letting people go, well, then we're going to do that.
Okay, Kyle, let's go to you next.
Yeah, appreciate that. So, having worked with the other transit agencies before to improve their processes, raise funds, and improve their ridership, I think what I can say that worked the best in those instances was deep collaboration with the community. And I think that's what I would like to bring to RTD so that we do meet our climate goals, so that we do meet our ridership goals. I think for the longest time, RTD has taken a back seat in a lot of ways. You build a building and you ask for RTD after it's already up. And RTD doesn't know what to do. And so I think what we need to do is move RTD to a leadership position in the region, coordinating better with local communities so that we can create dedicated lanes for transit, communicating with the state better so that we can do funding partnerships, communicating with the federal government through the different agencies and groups that RTD is a part of, so that we can ensure sustainability in our system.
Thank you. Bob, you've got the last word.
I love that. So, in 5 years, I would like to see no more schedules. I'd like to see it be a given that you show up at a stop and within 15 minutes or less, you're going to get picked up and whisked off on your way. Connections should be efficient. I would also like to see at that time a livable wage for transit workers. I believe the local, which has its autonomy, has been less than aggressive in doing what needs to be done to bring the wages up to speed with where we are today. $25 an hour is the starting wage when you have to pay $17.50 in rent a month for a one-bedroom apartment is more than 50% of your pay. They're not going to stick around for that kind of a job. We need those people to be well taken care of. Lastly, I want to see transit-oriented employee home ownership land development. I want the light rail stations with the park and ride sitting empty in the asphalt, reflecting the heat of the sun, to become residences that the RTD personnel can benefit from. Thank you.
Great. Let's give a hand to our candidates. Thank you very much, Dan.